Hello, and welcome to this talk about where were they buried, Harefield. If you had ancestors who lived and died in Harefield, then they may well have been buried in the churchyard surrounding the parish church of St Mary the Virgin. Harefield was the westernmost parish of the county of Middlesex and now forms part of the London borough of Hillingdon. St Mary the Virgin is the only church in this ancient parish, which is unusual for Greater London. Most were divided as the population increased over the years, but this was not the case with Harefield. The parish remained fairly rural, with 2/3 of the land being given over to haymaking in order to feed the horses of London. The church building has some medieval features. It is thought that the west wall of the nave may date from the 12th century, so local people will probably have been buried around the church for at least 900 years. However, the burial registers only date from 1538, but these include named people who were all interred at St Mary's. Any later registers will be at the church, as the graveyard is still open to local parishioners, those on the electoral roll, or where there is an existing grave in which one person had been previously buried. The churchyard was extended in 1889 and again in 1928. The Uxbridge and West Drayton Gazette of the 30th of March 1928 says that the land for this latter extension was granted by the Lord of the Manor, Sir Francis Newdigate, and was on the east side of the churchyard, where an old cedar tree had stood. More wealthy people could have their grave marked with a stone bearing an inscription, and these monumental inscriptions can be very useful for family historians. Unlike the burial registers, they can also include references to family members who are not buried here. Frederick Simon Snell, an antiquarian who lived in Hendon, spent much time copying old documents from Middlesex, and his work contains monumental inscriptions taken from the churchyard of St Mary in 1909. This large manuscript is at the Society of Genealogists, if you want to have a look at it. Also at the SOG is a recording of them taken in 1935 by Alfred Ridley Bax, and various other transcriptions too. The London Borough of Hillingdon has its own family history society with which we share this area. Monumental inscriptions from St Mary Harefield were recorded by Hillingdon Family History Society in about 1995 and are available on CD from online shops Genfair and Parish Chest. They can also now be seen on Find My Past. If you've found a memorial to an ancestor in a particular graveyard, it might be possible to obtain a digital photograph of it using the Find a Grave website. Apparently, some 93% of monuments in the churchyard of St Mary have now been photographed here. St Mary's is unusual because part of the churchyard was laid out as an Australian cemetery after the First World War, with an obelisk erected in 1921 and an arch and gateway in 1924. The reason there are Australians here is because a large local mansion, Harefield Park, was owned at that time by an Australian couple, Charles Billiard Leake and his wife Letitia. In 1915, they offered it to the Australian government to use as a hospital to treat injured Australian soldiers, and Harefield Park became known as the #1 Australian Auxiliary Hospital. The house itself was used, and huts were also built on the lawn. It was entirely staffed by members of the Australian Imperial Force medical staff. It is estimated that some 50,000 soldiers passed through this hospital. Records from this time were sent to Australia after the war and are now at the Australian War Memorial Library, which can be accessed online. The bit of the cemetery used for the burial of the Australians was the site of the old manor house, Harefield Place, which was next to and south of the church. 111 men who had died at the hospital, together with one nurse, Sister Ruby Dickinson, are buried here. If you want to know more about records available for the Australian hospital, or indeed for anyone who lived in Harefield in times past, we have a handy parish research guide for Harefield, which can be bought through the links on our website, www.lwmfhs.org. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.